everybody, Steve Falcon Napier. Welcome to the Circle of Brilliance. Today we're going to continue our discussion on the secrets of trade show selling, and this is just the first 10 out of the 25 things that you might evaluate if you were to go to a trade show and work the floor. So we've kind of talked about some of these already, so I'm just going to scroll through this. I just opened them up as PDF so I don't lose my file again. So we talked about the reasons why someone would exhibit. We talked about why the location ends up being such a thing. By the way, these PDFs are also available as Word files. I did this as a series, a follow-up series of short articles I could send to the booth holders or whatever, just to kind of, remind them about what they could do. So rather than giving them all the answers to how to improve in all 25 aspects right away or in some single document, I said, nope, I'm going to trickle it out to them, because what I'm really trying to do is to establish a relationship with them and hopefully get them to have a conversation with me. So yeah, anyway, so it was a series of very short, I mean, you can see how long it is. It's a very short article. It's only 4 or 5 paragraphs. Yeah. Okay, anyway, we talked a lot about location. If you guys have any questions as we're clicking through this, you can just stop me and I'll be more than happy to go into more detail. Oops, where's number 3? Number 3. Okay, that's 4. 1, 4. Oh, really? Seriously? 5. What happened to 3? Oh. Just a moment, chat amongst yourselves. There's 6, 7, 8. There's 9. What happened to 1, 2, or what happened to 3? Oh, there it is, 3. Exploit your space. This is where we talked about that not only the location is important, but how you end up configuring the booth itself is important. So we talked quite a bit about don't setting up a barrier, make sure that your space is commanding the attention, see if you can get the booth to face into an intersection, or rather into either one of the side aisles. So you kind of see where we're going here, but we want as much as possible to create it out as a diagonal, if you can. Hard to do in a simple 10 by 10 space, but if you get a 10 by 10 space on the corner of something, you're able to do it as a diagonal. Okay, that's that one. Questions about diagonal arrangements? No, it's just a matter of tape measure. That's number 1. Where number 4, okay, furnishing failures. So, that real estate that you have is very limited, and you got to decide what are you going to fill that with. In all likelihood, the promoters of the show are going to provide you with like a 6-foot table and probably a couple of chairs. The first thing I would do is tell them that you don't need the chairs. Take the chair and get rid of it. Now, if you really need to have the table there, you position it at the back, as far back in the booth as possible. And you want to make sure, again, that there's always a space that people can step out of the aisle and into your space. Anyway, it talks about video monitors, etc. So you just have to make sure those are high enough so that people standing in the booth don't block the videos. Very often you see that people have set up some sort of a monitor on the table, but they haven't elevated it. So, who can see it? You can only see it if the booth is otherwise empty, and that's just a sad commentary altogether. So whenever you possibly can, make sure you've got one of those, I don't know what they call those, armatures that allow you to put your monitor up quite high. You can tilt it and spin it around and whatever, but you need to have a good armature to be able to make sure that it's at least at shoulder height, if not higher. As far as the chairs are concerned, get rid of them altogether. No one should ever sit down, and I mean ever. So sitting conveys the message you are tired, bored, or busy, and no one wants to visit a booth staffed by tired, bored, or busy people. So keep productive tension high by keeping everyone on their feet. Even if you have one of those rare booths where sales transactions are both initiated and consummated on the spot, you still don't need chairs. Instead, a small tabletop at standing height is ideal. And so, you know how you go into some of the bars or things like that, or you're at a breakout session, or they're doing snacks at the hotels, and they've got a lot of these small round tables that are up at standing height that you and a couple of people could stand around it and set your drinks down on it or whatever it is you happen to be. So if you need a table in order to talk business, those are the tables that you should really be using. So bring them or request them, as case may be. And then the last point is all about eliminating physical and visual clutter. It's amazing how often you'll walk by a booth and you can see all these open boxes of whether it's marketing materials or just a bunch of chachula kind of stuff that people brought along for as their kind of trade show survival kit sort of stuff. No one needs to see that. If you do put your table at the back of the room, that table is almost always draped. If it isn't draped, you need to drape it so that you can use the underside of the table to conceal whatever kind of stuff. You really don't need to do that. So the rear walls should be used for signage, illustrations, brochures if necessary, beautiful backdrop, a spotless piece of carpeting, a small storage cube, and a few plants to add a natural element will meet your needs with a minimal sacrifice of floor space. So thoughts about that, or Chris, got any remembrances to share with us about how cluttered some people's booths can be?
Yeah, some booths had so much stuff in their booth, people couldn't even maneuver. So people would always stand on the outside and just walk away because it seemed too complex. It was just way too much. It lacked the simplicity that
Right.
would normally be inviting for people to come in. So people didn't want to trip, or if one person was in their booth, they felt it was full.
Yeah, yep, 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 yep.
Yeah.
And I think it goes back to making sure they're very clear about the purpose for their for attending the trade show. If it's to get leads, well, then I just need to get leads. And if I end up stumbling across somebody who is already ready to, become a client, well, then yeah, I need to do whatever I can do to lock that piece of business down. But if that's not the purpose of my booth, why would I set it up for that purpose? Uh, what I need to get leads is different than what I need to make presentations, and that's different than what I need to close a deal, and that's different than what I need for marketing survey or whatever, getting people's feedback or opinions about something. We got to be really clear about what the booth is for because space is at a very high premium. And at most of these kinds of shows, you're going to find almost everything is going to be business to business, but occasionally there's going to be a vendor who says, if you're going to get 50,000 people traveling through a space, I want to be there, even though I'm selling a product to the consumer. So, for example, how often have you gone through these kinds of shows and suddenly there's a booth that's trying to offer you something like timeshares in resort locations? They're not business to business, that's business to consumer. But because there's such a wonderful flow of people at this show, they think, well, that could be a good audience for us to have something in front of. I mean, I've gone to shows that you would have assumed were going to be all business, strictly business to business. And suddenly there's a double wide booth of someone doing a demonstration of their precious cookware that nothing will stick to. Or, where can you go and not have a bunch of Cutco knives being presented to you? So it's also very possible that these shows are going to have vendors who are not necessarily in the industry, but appreciate and want to get in front of the crowd that's walking through there. Obviously, they're doing product demonstrations. They need more space. They're going to have more stuff. When it comes to the knives, perhaps the knives, but very often for the cookware sort of stuff, they want to be able to sell it on the spot and hand it to you to take away with you. So, were there anything like that, Chris, at the show you were at? Were there any things to consumers instead of just the industry?
Yeah, I was searching my mind. You know, two things, well, one service, but two companies that stood out. And it was with getting your headshots for LinkedIn.
Oh, there
You
you
know,
go.
so in the midst of everybody else focused on L&D, there was two people that were simply there just to offer services for you to get the perfect headshots for LinkedIn. And
Yeah.
they had long lines.
Oh, I'm sure they did. And so were they selling those headshots or were they using the headshots as bait to get you in to talk about, bigger photographic packages or something like that?
Nice bait.
Oh,
Nice bait. So you'll get the free head, you get one free headshot. Of course,
yeah.
they took multiple positions and styles. So you get that one free, but you know, the upsell is going, you know, people are going to want more than just that one.
Yeah, yeah, yeah. Because that really is interesting kind of bait. I mean, people try to take their own headshots with their iPhone, and a good
Right.
photograph is really more about lighting than it is about the camera. So, you need a professional. If you want a professional picture, then you got to have a professional be the ones who set it up. And if they're willing to give you at least a reasonably professional, low resolution headshot suitable for LinkedIn or something like that, well, that's great. And I would not be at all surprised if whatever they give you for LinkedIn has their watermark on it so that people know where the headshot came from and then they can reach out and get one from them as well. So, yeah, so my point is they need more space. I mean, if you're going to be taking photographs of people, they had to set up something. I mean, I imagine it was more elaborate than when you sit down at the motor vehicles department to get your next driver's license headshot taken. I hope it was nicer than that.
Yeah, it was. It
Yeah,
was.
but even that takes up space. So did they have just a 10 by 10 or did they step up?
And it had a small spot. It was 10 by 10, probably 10 by 10, but they only utilized enough for where you can stand and their lighting equipment to be
Yeah,
on you. So they maximized that
right.
space.
And so the line waiting for pictures to be taken were actually in the aisles.
Yes.
Yeah.
Yes.
And so think of how
Well,
much that
well, see,
upsets your neighbors.
the booth was positioned in the back of the hall. To your point about location,
Yeah.
so where the long lines were is along the back wall, which didn't interfere with anything.
Yeah. Well, for them, that's pretty good. I would hope they chose that spot deliberately, that they were conscientious about wanting their crowd to have a space to stand without feeling as though they're interfering with other booth operations or something like that. So, because if you're like me, I hate being in somebody else's way. And
Mhm.
so, while I might get online because I want to do whatever it is they're offering, if it doesn't happen super fast and I'm waiting for a while, I start to become increasingly sensitive to what I'm doing in the space that I'm in. And I might just say, it's not worth it. I'm just going to go. And that would be a shame to cost a client that. So you got to just make sure if you're anticipating a line that there's room for that line that doesn't interfere with other booths or other people trying to get by. And yeah, okay. All right. Questions about furnishings? If you
So
don't,
you use the attention planner to like even help them establish purpose so they can
oh yeah,
choose the right size and that kind of thing.
right. And keep in mind as we work our way through these that this really is a framework for a consulting engagement.
Mm,
So as you think about each one of these, you could very well bring them insights, understanding that they had no thoughts of whatsoever. I mean, they might not have even thought about furniture. What should I have in my booth? Unless they've done a lot of work in trade shows and learned it the hard way, how else would they know the kinds of things that we're talking about in this rather simple sort of program?
yeah.
Yeah. So, okay. And by the way, when you've got 25 things that you could talk about, if you only spent 15 minutes on each one of them, you've filled over 6 hours. So,
Mm.
be aware that if you wanted to do everything in a lifetime of scratch that in Secrets of Trade Show Selling, you could easily do this as a full day program. And yeah, if you want to just do bits and pieces of it, it could be shorter than that. But 15 minutes is not much time for you to kind of present the concept and then have some discussion around it, maybe give them some sort of an exercise or kind of a self-assessment experience to go through, a notes guide or whatever. I mean, 15 minutes is nothing. But 6 hours is pretty much all you have in terms of contact time in a full day program. That would give you 4 90-minute blocks with a little bit of a break in between blocks 1 and 2 and blocks 3 and 4 and a lunch. And in between them, you filled a whole day. So, it's a lot of stuff. All right, anywho, let's see about 5. If this one's 5, let's see. Oh, yeah, thank you. The science of signage. So think of your booth as the cover of a popular magazine. A cover's job is to grab people's attention long enough for them to read the headline. The headline's job is to get enough of a reaction from people that they are compelled to read the subheadings. Their job is to make people want to see what's inside badly enough that they're willing to pay for the information. The same system applies to trade show booths. And so we talk about, you walk by the average booth and it might have one of those stand-up display signs that talk, a little bit about something they felt compelled to talk about. But they're not really using the science of signage. They're not using that backdrop as effectively as they could. And so you really do need to have a great headline. And I mean a headline that goes most of the distance between one edge of the booth and the other edge of the booth on the again the back wall, wherever the high drape is. And so it doesn't have to be exactly 10 feet, make it look good, but nevertheless it needs to be a headline. And that headline is not the name of your company. It should be in question form that will pull people into it. In fact, I give a little example down here for one that I did for a client. We had a client at the time, Dynamic Staffing. Actually, that wasn't the exact name of their company, but nevertheless, Dynamic was a staffing company. And so I thought, well, that's a great name for a company. Let's not just put Dynamic Staffing at the top of it. Let's put a question: how many dynamic people could you use? And because they were actually, I think they did permanent placements, but they did a whole lot of temporary placements, project specific placements, things like that. Anyway, so that's what I'm talking about when it comes to a headline. So your booth needs a great headline. Its purpose is not to identify your company, but rather to catch the eye of the passersby and attract them to approach your booth. As they get closer, the secondary signage should pre-qualify your visitors and pull the appropriate visitors inside your booth. The remaining signage should provide qualified visitors with enough information about your company so the purpose of your booth is fulfilled, if necessary, without the involvement of a sales staff member. So if you think about the back wall as being a sales representative, a standalone sales rep, and that this should make far more sense to today's audiences than it would have made to the audiences in the early years of the century, because we know that when you go to a website has to follow these rules, or you're not going to be clicking through very far. So there needs to be a subject, there needs to be some general categories, there needs to be some bullet points so that people can rather quickly find whatever it is that's causing them sufficient tension that they chose to come to your website to begin with. So I think today's audiences understand the science of signage or the sequencing of message depth far more than people would have understood this 20 years ago.
Who provides that, or is that your own design, or when you do these booths, that's something that you create?
No, because, well, look, when we talk about planning your booth, that planning for a booth usually starts happening months before the actual show.
Mhm.
As far as your deal with the show sponsor, vendor, whatever is concerned, I promise you they're not going to offer you the kinds of services we're talking about here. There will be a very simple sign on your booth in the same font for every single one of them. It's going to be a plain white piece of foam core that's got your name on it. And that's just really so you can find the booth that you paid for. It's really not for
Mm,
people that are at the show. It's for you. And I promise you, there's going to be a table and a couple of chairs, maybe some draping. For the table, usually though draping only on the side and on the back of your booth, and the draping on the side is only like waist high or even lower hip high, and that's it. Maybe a couple of chairs. That's what you get.
interesting, because I
Yeah.
always wondered about that because I've gone to a couple in in healthcare, and certainly the ones who have the most fancy
Mhm.
equipment are radiologists.
Yeah.
And
Yeah.
it's always like these big production, the newest equipment that's coming out, and the
Mhm.
ones that treat cancers, the one that does this, especially for like interventional
Yeah.
radiologists.
Right.
It's like a production. I always
Of
wonder who
course it is. Of
sets
course
all
it is.
that
And,
up.
and think about this, Brian. The average 10 by 10-foot booth does not come with electricity. It certainly
Wow.
doesn't come with internet. And so, if you're going to be demonstrating that kind of equipment or capital equipment of any sort, not only might you need electricity, you might need the high voltage kind of electricity. I don't know how much power
Hmm.
some of these devices pull when it comes to capital equipment in the medical realm, but I got to believe a lot of it requires its own dedicated line. And if it requires a dedicated line, you got to believe they're going to charge you big time to have that access to that electricity inside of inside of whatever the venue happens to be. But
Wow.
but even a regular old plug it in so you can have a lamp, that electricity is not provided. You have to arrange for that and pay for that separately. But
Wow.
back to your question, if you want to have good signage made, you're going to need to use, in the old days, you'd have to go to either a sign printing shop in your town or at least a printer of some sort. Some towns have actually got companies that focus on doing nothing but displays for trade shows. And now they would sell you all the furniture. They'd sell you all of the setup requirements. They would do it all for you because that's their business, is to give you a one-stop shop for all things needed for your trade show booth. But these days, you could really just go online and you can say, I want a roll up trade show banner, and you can order them online. They get printed and shipped to you. So it might take a week from the time you order it until the time you receive it, but they're not particularly expensive. They're easy to set up. So there's a lot of that stuff readily available. Tim, go right ahead. You've unmuted.
Yeah, so I also have a jewelry business with
Mhm.
natural gemstones, and to your right, in fact I have a pull-up banner
Yep.
when I do shows, and I got mine from FedEx.
Yep.
Uh,
Yep. Yep. Yep.
they have templates that you can use, or you can just straight out customize it, but they're very effective.
Yeah, right, right, right. What was the name of that first online print company that would give any of us credit, any of us business cards if we wanted them? Free business cards.
Was it
Vista.
Vistaprint? Yeah.
Vistaprint. Yeah, and then because once you got to Vistaprint's space or their website, and you started looking around, your head was kind of going like, "Oh, I didn't know I could do that. Oh, I can get that printed. Oh, they can do mugs, they can do banners, they can do, you know, customized folders. They can do it all. They can do it all. I mean, so their bait is these simple business cards. And so, what does that cost them? Imagine what their business card production facility looks like. So
Interesting.
yeah, they'll give you
Well,
a hundred.
the digital cards are the ones that are the big hit now.
Yeah, 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 yeah,
Yeah.
yeah. So my point is, yeah, yeah. You don't rely on the venue to give you the kinds of things that you need. You either need to find someone to do it for you, or you need to go and get them yourself. And remember when we were all going to school? Um, think about kindergarten and first grade. Are we all of the same generation that we were not expected to be able to read at all when we first went to kindergarten?
Hmm.
Remember? And maybe if we were reading anything, it was simple little words from some storybook that we had. We certainly weren't expected to know how to spell anything. We certainly weren't expected to know how to type. But you tell me how many 5 or 6 year olds you know who can work their way around a computer like a pro.
Yeah.
Yeah. So it's a really different world now. So long ago in business, we would not expect the average employee to have any background or ability whatsoever when it comes to graphic design or laying out something. And nowadays, everybody goes, if they want to get their digital photos printed out, we all go to some website at CVS or wherever, and we've learned how to do our own layouts. And yeah, we can add some words to it and on and on. So I'm saying all this just to say that in today's world, people do have far greater, what do we say, standard sort of abilities to do some simple graphics and some simple layout sorts of things. And these kinds of websites are designed to help you streamline that process, raise the bar a little bit on your game so that you can do it yourself. And, that's what most of this is really all about. Yep, signs.
Cool.
Yeah, there you go. Tim just chatted over to everybody a link to FedEx's website for do that. Do shop around, by the way, because a lot of times these companies are offering special deals on certain things. So shop around a little bit if you're going to be ordering anything. Okay.
Nice.
Yeah. All right. So here we go. So above all, the copy on the signage must pay attention. Words are a form of bait, and you need the right bait to catch the ideal prospect. So how many dynamic people could you use? It hints at the industry you're in, but leaves enough mystery to boost tension. As the visitor gets closer, several secondary signs become visible. These signs pre-qualify the visitors by targeting the source of their tension, such as dynamic reductions in recruiting costs and dynamic employment tax control. Visitors with no interest in reducing recruiting costs or controlling employment taxes will deselect themselves and continue on their way, while those who enter your booth are much more likely to be the prospect you're looking for. Does that make sense? I think a lot of this is really pretty obvious. I just don't think the average booth holder thinks about this stuff.
No, I don't think they think about that.
There you go. Yeah, and there's a whole bunch of you on the call, so do feel free to chime in your personal experiences, your thoughts around it. So, we're all benefiting from the circle being a circle. All right, let's go on to the next one. This is lesson 6. Show yourself in the best light. So generally, the ambient light available in a convention center is barely adequate for setting up, let alone creating any sense of style. Beyond the obvious advantage of allowing visitors to actually read, proper lighting attracts visitors, directs their attention, promotes visual tension, and adds an element of drama and elegance to your booth design. So good lighting commands attention. A well-lit booth is visible from a distance and long before its dreary neighbors are noticed at all. Lighting also directs a visitor's attention to specific elements within your booth, such as graphics and signage. From a tension management perspective, bright and colorful spaces boost visitor tension, while dull gray spaces reduce it. Eroding tension is your enemy in trade show selling, and you must do whatever you can to stimulate productive tension. The more dramatic the lighting scheme, the more tension it produces. If your backdrop was professionally designed and produced by a display company, you no doubt have a wide variety of lighting options available to you from the manufacturer. So for example, the pull-up display that Tim was just talking about, he could have bought that just as the display. He could have bought it with a clip-on light at the top of it. He could have ordered it so that it's two-sided with lights on both sides. The lights could be from the top pointing down or from the bottom pointing up. So he's got he was offered, I'm sure, all kinds of add-ons to whatever the display is that he, again, they're trying to sell as much as they can in lighting as a deal. So while the majority of lighting will be used to illuminate the signage on the back wall of your display, supplemental lighting could be used to show off the plants or better define the booth area. If you've chosen to design and build a display yourself, be sure to allow for adequate lighting and the electricity to power it. So don't underestimate the value of good lighting. And again, in today's world, I don't know if I talked about technology in a booth when this was first done 20 years ago, but certainly, what's the likelihood that you're going to have a computer in your booth? You know, you're going to have one, your laptop, you're going to have something in the booth beyond lighting. So you do want to make sure that you have not only adequate lighting, but adequate outlets so that booth members or booth staff who need to charge their phone have some space to charge their phone. Don't think that when you get electricity to your booth that they're going to bring you 20 outlets. They're going to bring you one. They're going to bring you one long orange safety industrial extension cord. It's up to you to bring whatever the little splitter things are that you want, or power surge protectors, that kind of thing. You got to bring all that stuff with you. Okay, so questions about lighting, electricity?
So I'm
I'd just
wondering,
like to,
Yep.
I'd
Go
just
ahead,
like
Boris.
to add a comment here. My experience with these trade shows, oftentimes they're held in a facility that is union labor.
Yep.
And they are very much sticklers for you having to pay their people to do anything, including carrying in a box.
Absolutely. All the
Right.
move in, if it's a union environment, all the move in has to be provided by the union. And you need to get very clear with whoever the promoter is, whether or not that is included in your fee, or if that's something you need to contract separately. But regardless, I'll tell you, you need to have a pocket full of $10 bills, $5 bills, depending on what it is you're asking someone to lug in. You better be tipping to make sure that all gets done. And you might need to slip a manager a bigger bill to get some priority treatment, but that's just the way the whole game of
Yeah.
convention centers operates.
And you'd be shocked at the hourly rates that they're going to charge for
Yeah.
basic things like connect an extension cord.
Yeah. Now they'll move the extension cord, but I've never seen anyone put up any kind of thing about you plugging your own lamp in. So I don't think because they would rather move on to the next booth to get the next tip. So as much as they say they got to do everything, if it is something that's really just one of these minuscule sort of tasks, I promise you they're not going to say boo to you. They want a bigger tip from somebody else. So, but yeah, don't come in there with a long spool of extension cord. That's gonna get their ire up. And by the way, when you upset a union worker, what's the chances of you getting any help whatsoever?
very none.
Very none, very none. And so don't shoot yourself in the foot. So just someone in the booth has got to have the cash and the authority to be able to hand out $5 bills, $10 bills, $20 bills, 50, whatever it is, whatever goes along with what you're asking them to do. Okay. And by the way, once you tip them pretty well, they're going to be they're going to be there with you. They're going to want to keep earning and keep earning. And they know that if you tip well, you're probably going to continue to tip well. And in the big scheme of things, what those tips add up to for the whole show is going to be minimal compared to what you've already spent on the booth space and the signage and the staff to be there. It really doesn't add up to a whole lot, but it makes a big difference in your relationship with the union workers. And by the way, even if they're not unionized, you still need to get someone to help you move stuff. So toss them a tip. Okay, so good lighting, we talked about that. Design, yep. All right, yeah. So we've done this. Okay, questions, comments about lighting, electricity? Nope. All right, let's go to the next one. A few more to go. That should be number 7. Okay, WWMD. Now that stands for what would Martha do? Back in the day, 20 years ago, everyone was kind of noticing what Martha Stewart was talking about and all that good sort of stuff. I think she's fallen out of vogue and never really recovered after her time in prison and that. But nevertheless, what would Martha do? Let's check your progress. You know your purpose. You've secured a great location. You understand layout and lighting. Now the big question is, what would Martha do? A trade show isn't supposed to be a stuffy, buttoned-down miniature version of the corporation it represents. Instead, it's a chance for the corporation to creatively introduce and express itself in front of a highly targeted audience. If it's handled properly, a trade show should be as upbeat, energetic, and enjoyable as the people attending it hope it will be. To accomplish this, your booth must contribute something to the visual excitement of the show. Whether you choose an engaging but appropriate theme for your booth or a simple but stunning exhibit, design is of paramount importance when managing productive tension. At a minimum, your booth should be designed around an attractive color scheme with well-coordinated graphic elements and font selections. While some companies should aim for elegance, others should opt for an outrageous design, incorporating as much color and movement as possible. Balloons, pinwheels, bunting, and streamers are sure to attract attention, but so will a dignified and refined space featuring museum-quality graphics accented with soft fabric swags and a vase of flowers. Choose a design that is consistent with your company's image and personality, that conveys your message and supports your primary purpose for exhibiting. So, I would predict, and Chris, you can verify this if you want, that very few booths at Chris's show bothered to actually create the kind of booth I'm talking about right here. Yeah, the big grandfathers of the industry, no doubt did, because they learned their lesson slowly but surely along the way. But most people, again, just show up with minimal thought being put into their booth, minimal design being factored in. And so the whole thing seems thrown together or amateurish, or it doesn't really want to say match the dignity, the gravitas, the excitement of your company. And so we got to make sure you look the part. Again, we're trying to attract attention. So you can imagine a show that Chris was describing with some 500 vendors. You put 500 vendors into 10 by 10 booths, no bigger than that, and you can calculate the floor space that's required. This is a massive show. And so it's going to be set up when we talked about the perimeter of the trade show floor. Then you got all these interior kinds of aisles. It really does become quite the thing that needs to be navigated. And if you think about your own experience at trade shows, big trade shows, how often have you gone to a trade show with somebody and said, should we just do all the vendors on the right side of this aisle, and then when we get to the end, we'll come back and
Yeah.
we'll do the other side, or we're going to
Yeah.
bounce back and forth, right? Yeah. I mean, we even do this when you go to a local art show, a little one of those outdoor kind of art festival sorts of things. You want to see everything, but you really got to plan how you're going to do that. Ricochet, or are you going to really stay very methodical up and down, whatever the aisles happen to be? And anywho, so at a certain point in time, you're going to abandon that strategy. You might abandon it because crowd flow interferes with whatever strategy you had for experiencing the show. And so when it gets abandoned, and I promise you it will, it's only a question of how tired are you going to be before you start to become a lot more selective. When you become a lot more selective, things that grab your eye are more likely to be the booths you're going to stop by. So is it colorful? There's trade shows always have a ceiling that is far, far, far above the booths themselves. Can you use some of that airspace? Can you put some balloons at the top rail of your booth? And what can you do? Right, exactly. Chris is saying you need some pattern interrupts. You need to be able to do something to alleviate the doldrum of moving through the show in this methodical kind of way. In fact, if I said to you guys, how many of you genuinely want to visit 500 booths? Nobody does.
No.
No, 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 no. And you want to be polite, but you're going to walk past the majority of these booths. What's going to dictate you stopping? Forget stepping into the booth, just stopping in front of the booth. It's got to be things like the signage, like the lighting, like something to do this. David, you've just unmuted. What would you like to add? David?
I was going to ask, is there a such thing as trade show staging, kind of like what they do in real estate? Is that a thing?
Well, yeah, that's what the companies that specialize in doing trade shows, and I promise you, any city that has a lot of convention activity has got one, if not multiple, vendors who specialize in giving you a one-stop shop for your trade show needs. So if you just looked up trade show consulting, they might say to you, well, I'll promise you, you would go into their facility and they would have all kinds of booth examples already set up, and you would purchase that booth as a package. And so you're renting the furniture, they'll handle all the signage. And you don't have to do all of it, but they're ready to do all of it for you. And so, yeah, you can rent the furniture. But I don't know that inside of the trade show itself, someone's just going to set up like a staging kind of a thing. I mean, if you go to the furniture rental places, you can't say to them, I want to rent something for 3 days. There's
Right,
want to rent for at least a month. Where if you go to the trade show services, they're used to things being 3 or 4 days. And so
right.
they're the ones that deliver it. They understand each of the venues, the best way to get stuff there, where the loading docks are, how to deal with the union or whatever the staff happens to be. Let them coordinate it all for you if you've got a big enough show. I don't think a 10 by 10-foot booth is going to merit that kind of things. Oh, yes, Makaguchi, the degree to which an individual values a thing will determine the level of attention that thing will command.
Mm.
Very good. Well, Chris, did you end up with a copy of The Philosophy of Value, or did you get that somewhere else from Makaguchi?
I've still been on the search. I can't find that book to save my life.
No, it's a
I'm
rare,
telling
rare
you.
book. I'm telling
It
you,
is. I've been
periodically.
looking for it for like 5 years or
Yep,
more,
yep,
longer,
yep, yep,
since I
yep.
known you,
I've
over
got
10 years,
one.
decade.
One copy of it is all I know. And maybe if you go to the libraries, they might have a copy. But I found it in a rare book seller. So, yeah, anyway.
I checked a university library one time and they had one copy that was lost.
Oh,
So
lovely. Yeah, you know what that means. Someone just choked.
Wow.
Yeah, because I mean, it's a great book, and obviously because it was published, I don't know, when was that? Back in the 30s or 40s? It's an old book.
mhm.
How many copies even exist? So, yeah. Okay. Anyway, that's what would Martha do? Let's go on to number 8. This is baiting the hook. Oh, I wonder why I've got a double top there. Baiting the hook. Enter a drawing, play a game, sample something, check out an unusual object, meet a celebrity guest, talk to a stunning spokesmodel, watch a magician. These and dozens of other ideas seem to be the perfect bait for attracting people to your booth. But there's a problem. They attract everyone. And that's probably not what you were hoping to do unless your ideal prospect is everyone. Generally speaking, your ideal prospects are but a fraction of the total group attending the show. And with a steady parade of people walking past your booth, there's no time to waste with visitors who will never become your customers. You want to use bait that is not only interesting to the visitors you really want to meet, and unappealing to everyone else. You want to use bait that is only interesting to the visitors you really want to meet and unappealing to everyone else. In addition, the perfect bait must hold their attention only as long as it takes for you to approach them and introduce yourself. Oh, here we go. The digital spin wheels were a hit, but people participated for the prizes, not to do business. And see, that's the issue. It's like whatever they put on that digital spin wheel was probably not carefully thought out. They probably put things on the wheel that anybody and everybody would want. instead of things that are very specific to the targeted audience. So again, this is where you guys would come into play, giving people some exercise, if you will, or some planning sheet where they would really go, what is it that we can give people as a sample? What would we be providing to a prospect routinely anyway that we can put up on the wheel that would be viewed as something of being of great value to them? That's what you really want, not, just another piece of chachula. Okay, big screen TV showing a live sporting event will certainly attract a whole flock of visitors and keep them there for much too long, focused on something that has absolutely nothing to do with you, your company, or why you're there. On the other hand, if you're a software company, a demonstration of a software package for small business owners is very likely to attract small business owners and no one else. And now, if you're going to do that, by the way, now we're going to get into a bit of strategic seminar selling. Every time you do one of those demonstrations, you don't want to do the demonstrations one-on-one. You want to say that you're doing demonstrations start every 15 minutes, every 20 minutes, a new demonstration will happen. That helps people to know how long the demonstration is going to be, and it also helps them to decide, yeah, I want to see that demonstration. So you get to do it more efficiently as a small group of people rather than one-on-one. So remember, your goal is not to collect a fishbowl full of business cards of unqualified prospects, but to connect in a meaningful way with just those visitors most likely to use your products and services. Questions about baiting the hook? Then let me ask you guys. You are all in the human development industry. What kind of bait would you use in order to attract the kinds of prospects that you want to talk to?
An assessment.
You could give them an assessment. If it's a short enough assessment that they can do it right then and there, even better. But if it's one that requires them to sit down at their computer and take 15, 20 minutes to really fill it out, you're going to get less compliance or less follow through on those. But nevertheless, you've given them something of value. Maybe they will take it. What else could you give them? Or do you give them? Okay, assessments are a good idea. What else? Okay, Tim, you kind of mute and unmute. So what you got to say, bud?
Well, I'm bouncing back and forth between the jewelry business and the human development business.
Either one.
Yeah. So raffling a product when I'm thinking in terms of the jewelry business, but certainly on the human development side, the opportunity for assessment.
Yeah.
And
Notice that Tim used the word raffle. He did not say free raffle. And so if you guys have not visited Tim's jewelry website, in fact, Tim, go ahead and chat it over to everybody. His jewelry is gorgeous and a really, really distinctive sort of stuff, very modern in its appeal, and honestly, everyone would want it. But if he's selling the tickets for $1 each, or you could get, five of them for whatever, however you end up doing it, at least he could offset the cost of his investment in making that particular piece of jewelry. Now, what could also be up on that wheel would be a discount on one of the, on a purchase made or something like that. Or if they buy a bracelet, they get something in addition to it. So, there's a lot of different things that you could actually do. Again, in this particular case, everyone at the show could be his prospect, because if they don't personally want or need the jewelry, they may very well know someone that it would be a perfect gift for.
So T, I once did a show where the organizers actually asked the vendors to submit a product offering for their silent auction.
Yep.
And that in and of itself generated business for me.
It absolutely can. And again, they're trying to do something to, make some money for themselves, particularly if it was a bit of a charitable organization that was doing the silent auction, or, some group with a cause. That's a great way to go about doing it. And the other thing is that sometimes they'll ask you to donate something to go into either the VIP gift box or the like they'll have a giant gift basket that people are, a lucky attendee will win, or they'll do that as a raffle, and you can buy tickets to it as well. So it's good to be able to put something in there. You'll get a lot more value out of it than you actually think you will. So let me give you an example. For quite a while, I worked with a rather well-known multi-level marketing company specializing in telecommunication services and other utilities. They're now in some 30 some odd countries all over the world. So they did real good, real good. Well, one of the things that I did for them was I served as their delegate to the Direct Marketing Association's annual meeting. So at this annual meeting, you're going there and they're talking about different policies and all that, because there's a lot of legislation that impacts the world of direct marketing and all that sort of stuff. So anyway, there was stuff that had to be done. But one of the things that the organizers did was they said to every vendor, and keep in mind that this is this is not a show for consumers. This is only for people who are already vendors, who are coming together to make some decisions at the association level. There isn't a trade show going on during this kind of thing. There isn't. But instead they say, all of you sell something to consumers. We want you to provide us with enough of whatever the object happens to be, so that we can put it into the VIP gift box. And everyone who's attending the show, all delegates are going to receive this gift box. Now, doesn't that sound like fun? Wouldn't you like to be a delegate to get something like that? As when we get there, we find out that there is so much stuff that they're going to ship it to us after the event. So we're talking about huge boxes of free stuff from all of these companies in the world of multi-level marketing. So yes, I got a Cutco knife, and yes, I got you filled in Tupperware stuff and Avon stuff and shakes from umpteen different nutrition companies, and it's astounding the amount of stuff that they end up giving away. I always wondered, why would Cutco Knives want to give someone from ACN a knife? We're never going to be their client. They're never going to be our client. We're both competing for the same thing, and that's for people who are looking for an additional way to make money. We're all competing for the same people to join our opportunity instead of somebody else's opportunity. So I never understood why the Direct Marketing Association ended up giving people stuff, but they do. So thanks.
Wow,
Yeah.
those are not cheap knives either.
Well, they're not cheap at all. In fact, the knife that I got was the butcher knife, the large 10-inch butcher knife,
Mhm.
and it was their 50-year commemorative knife.
Oh my
And
goodness.
so on a good day, that
Finest
was
cutlery I've
$100.
owned.
Well, what's that? What's that?
Some of the finest cutlery I've owned.
Well, it's true. I
It
mean,
holds an edge very well, and
it
it
holds an
sharpens
edge
well.
well. The handles are good. You can throw it in the dishwasher. I would never do that, but you could throw it in the dishwasher and the handle won't get damaged. The handles are made out of the same thing that bowling balls are made out of. So it's a forever kind of a thing. So, and it's American made, so that's a good element too in their marketing. Anywho, point is, you can get some really good stuff. I've just never understood why they were giving us this stuff. All right, two more to go. Leaving a lasting impression. Giving away cheap little gizmos leaves the impression that you're the kind of company that gives away cheap little gizmos. On behalf of everyone attending on the show, our drawers are full. To make a real impression, give qualified visitors something that shows you understand their needs and want to give them something that will actually help them. So a package of tissues imprinted with the name of an allergy medication is much more effective than a pen or a magnet. Why? Because it's actually useful and it reminds them of the medication when they need it most. Put a little thought into it and you can come up with something unique, thoughtful, and useful, and you'll have a premium that pays. But the most effective premium is one that would be of great value to your ideal prospect, but of little or no value to visitors with no interest in your products or services. And we talked about this last time around. If you're a commercial printer, give some sort of a guide. Or in the human development industry, how come we can't give someone link to a special video that talks about stress management, or here's a little pocket guide about 10 ways to get yourself out of stress in a moment. So 10 ways to take a vacation without moving. These kinds of things are right, depending on who the audience is you're trying to go after, who you're trying to attract. So, yep.
One comment here. I'm going to be hopping off in a second because I got a meeting, but I just wanted to mention, coming from the financial services business, this can also backfire on you. And the way that I've seen this happen is you've got an investment company's trying to raise capital for their program, and they're giving away like $25 toys that you can take home for your kids and stuff like that.
Yeah.
And the understanding for any investment advisors walking past their booth is somebody's paying for that. It's probably coming out of my client's money. This does not sound like a good use of money.
Right, exactly. And so that's what we're talking about. While we want to give them something that has value, it doesn't have to have a lot of dollar value, if you will. It just has to be perceived as something that has some inherent practical value is the only word I got for them to do that. So, and then here's the important thing here. At the same time, you should never give away what you hope to sell. And our little joke there, but it's true, is that I promise you, if you give away what you're actually hoping to sell, the person who's going to win the free drawing is the one that would have paid you good money. So why give away what you're trying to sell? Give away something else related to the product or service, or maybe a discount sort of thing that you could do. Something gets them to visit your place of business or ensures a future meeting. And then the last point we made on this was that premiums should be earned, not given away. Don't put them in a fishbowl. Don't leave them in a pile. Instead, these are things that need to be in your pocket or under your control, that after you've had a conversation, you can give someone a little thank you for stopping by. Or if they fill out a questionnaire, participate in a survey, give you feedback on some product evaluation, something or another, then you can give them that as your little thank you gift. And yeah. All right.
Hey, T.
Yeah.
Someone was actually giving away DVDs, and I thought that was so interesting because I was like, most people don't have use of a DVD now.
No,
Everything
we
is so
don't have
digital and
Yeah,
streamlined.
right. We don't have a DVD player anywhere in this household.
Right.
So
I left it in the hotel.
right, but like, thanks. Now what? So
Right.
that's why
Computers don't even use them anymore.
I know it's like, okay, that was a great technology, but it's not today's technology. So yeah. All right. So let's look at number 10. I think I've got one more left. And this is snob appeal. So snob appeal. You don't become exclusive until you exclude. Soak in that for just a second. You don't become exclusive until you exclude. There is nothing more exciting than being on the invitation list of an exclusive event. Now imagine your shattered expectations when you arrive in your formals only to find a hastily placed bowl of candy on the table and no one there to greet you with a warm welcome. Ridiculous? Well, consider what's happening in your booth. Even though no one is going to show up in their formals, they certainly do have expectations of you at a trade show. Don't disappoint them. Nothing communicates a more complete lack of style or consideration than the ubiquitous candy bowl. Could you possibly have put any less thought into serving your role as a host? If you really want to make a great impression and the size and profile of your prospect base makes it cost justified, consider offering a hospitality suite. Otherwise, consider the need for hospitality altogether. Hospitality encourages people to linger, and that might not serve you well. Your prospects will much prefer your sincere efforts in building a mutually profitable relationship than by offering them a hunk of sugar. On behalf of all of your customers, a candy bowl is not hospitality. Worse yet, a candy bowl encourages everyone to stop and might pull you into conversations with unqualified visitors. Unless everyone is your prospect, you're better off to free up the space for more productive sales-related materials. And if you must provide candy, you should at least have it custom imprinted with a compelling message about what you have to offer. Otherwise, forget it.
Mm.
All right, I want you guys to kind of just think about what you're doing is really about making an impression on somebody. When all is said and done, it's all about this impression. You don't need to give something away at all at your booth if, in fact, you realize that there are some visitors to the booth that are so valuable to you, you want to send them up to to a bit of a hospitality suite, or you would want to invite them to an after party, or invite them to stop by, the lounge later. You'll buy them a drink if you don't have a lot of people to do that. But have nice little invitations actually printed up. That they don't have to be any larger than a business card, but just say that this is a VIP ticket. You have to have the ticket to get into the event, whether that's a private room, hospitality suite, or even just stopping by for some drinks. You can do that. That's going to make a better impression with your more important clients. We're going to finish this discussion up next time around. But next time around, I'm going to be applying the change grid to it. And I'm going to ask you, where should different people placed on the change grid, based on where people placed on the change grid, what role should they be assigned in your booth? And is that going to be effective, ineffective, etc.? So that's what we're going to be doing. So with that, thank you all very much for joining in, and we'll pick up where we left off next time around. So
Hey,
thanks, everybody. Yeah.
Hey, if you have a moment, I would love to hear your thoughts on that text I sent you about tension
Oh,
management.
yes, thank you. Everyone stick around, stick around, stick around. Yeah. There's this interesting little text. Let me open up my little text window. I wanted to share this, and that was my response. In fact, here it is. I'll put it up here. So I don't know if I can make it any bigger, but it says, many of us think we need to be tense or stressed to get things done. Ask yourself, is it possible to do everything I need to do today with relaxed awareness?
Yeah.
Relaxed awareness. And
Yep.
this is from, I don't know who Corey Mascara is, but obviously this is what he's advocating. But what do you guys think? Is it possible to do everything you need to do in a day if you approach the day with relaxed awareness?
In fact, I would advocate that that's the way to go, or certainly a more regenerative way, right? Boris has sent me earlier an article about this idea of thinking about death, because it said the research is studying this, like, high neural activity is linked to shorter lifespans.
All right, interesting.
Yeah, so this idea, like, we burn the stakes, and the brain is a complex system, the human body is a complex system, but you shortchange it. So imagine everything is about this tense, tense, tense. Well, you have to double up now on recovery. So that means that that's now taking you away from something else, because you have to check out, to recover, if you're going to recover with quality, to come back.
Right,
So it seems to me being relaxed, and relaxed doesn't mean you're removed from it, right? Relaxed just means that you're coming from mid-grid, you're coming from that state of
well, no,
power.
let's think about that. It is true, if you're in the center of the change grade, you are at peace. There isn't a relaxed kind of an awareness kind of thing that's going on. So yeah, that would be a good place to start. But keep in mind that nothing really happens in the center of the change grid. So it's a
No,
great
but
place of observation, and it's a great place to
right,
recharge batteries. But where do you actually get the stuff done?
right. But what I'm trying to advocate for is this idea of establishing a from position.
Yes.
So, like, if you approach it, you're already tensed out, then to me that kind of, you compromise quality straight away. But if you at least have, one of the things you mentioned in the uh, power state is this idea of detachment.
Yes, in the center of the
right?
attachment.
So for me, what that translates is in terms of getting things done,
Yeah.
is managing the process, not the outcome. So in other words, I'm more interested in learning. I'm more interested in designing the systems than the actual goal itself is going to come if I can optimize my interaction within that system. So that's how I kind of really,
Right, but yeah,
yeah,
let me just kind of take that to its next level because I need to make sure I show you this. I'm opening up the PowerPoint so I can just show you. La da da ba da 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 da. We're looking at engagement rings. All right, so when you're at the center of the change grid, that's all really good. That's where that awareness is, and he's talking about relaxed awareness. The thing is that if I stay in the awareness place, while that has value and it's a comfortable place to be, I can recharge my batteries, etc. Even in your languaging, Brian, you implied that you had moved out of awareness into an intention.
right,
You want to
right,
learn things, you want to expand. You're no longer in the center of the change grid. You're still inside of the green circle, but you're formulating now an intention. And that intention to learn something isn't fulfilled until you get engaged in the actual learning process. So that was the issue that I think Tim and I were both feeling about what this individual had written. That it's a very good place to be. 15,000 people like the post, but in the absence of tension, there's no productivity. You don't need to be stressed, true, but productive tension is needed. And so I would say we need to have, if we don't have enough tension to get it done, we need to have enough tension combined with enough drive to get it all done. The thought that if you stay in relaxed awareness, that you're going to get everything on your to-do list done is missing some very, very important what to say, other elements that you moved on to. So if you stay in relaxed awareness, I'm telling you, nothing's going to change.
yeah. And I would agree with that. I think the way I think about it is integrated perspective, just like the
Yeah,
body, right? So there's no one system just acting on its own. It's acting in accord
right.
in
And so,
relation to a system within a system. So I see that
yeah,
relax is moving
so let's apply
forward.
this. Let's apply this directly to the way a human operates. Awareness is most definitely an experience of the mind.
Right,
You know, some other part of the brain gets involved and says, awareness isn't enough in this particular case. We need to formulate an intention. I'm
right,
still in my mind, but at least I'm being more directed. And then some other part of my body comes along and says, well, that intention is really good. I guess I need to get my hands moving or my feet moving. I need to
exactly.
actually do the work that needs to be done. So the relaxed awareness is a wonderful place to start from, but unless it moves into intention, into engagement, it's unlikely to actually ever happen. But I did also say that changes can occur upgrid. The level of tension can end up saying you might think awareness is enough, but that awareness is getting more and more and more and more strongly expressed in your world. You're now hyper aware. Now you've got to react to it. So instead of being able to be proactive and be deliberate and intentional and all that, now you're responding or really reacting to whatever's
Right,
with your tension. So
right.
just
So if I can apply this to my work, I think that for a lot of organizations that are dealing with DE&I, that's where they're stuck. We've done a
Mhm.
great job of raising awareness around creating inclusive work cultures,
yeah,
but there's not been a lot of good work done moving out grid.
yeah.
Mm,
And I think that's going to be true on so many different aspects of
yeah,
human growth and development that we are aware. And we might have even formulated some good solid intentions, but sooner or later we need people who can and will do the work. And
yeah,
that's where things start to fall apart. So I can have the greatest cause ever conceived of for humanity, but and I can create all the awareness. If people are going like, well, that's all our goal was. We just wanted to make people aware. Our intention was to make people aware. Well, then good for you. You made people aware. But how many of you said, I want to make people aware, but then you never do those things to make people aware?
And to
Right.
that point, T, that's the reason why some employees feel that their companies have not done an effective job
Right.
with diversity,
Because
right?
nothing beyond intention ever happened.
Right.
Right,
Yeah.
right.
So,
That's the
Hey, T, this
implementation
also
science.
yeah, go ahead, Chris.
Go ahead, Chris.
Yeah, this also connects to when you talk about how much, when someone wants a particular training program, wants you to design a training program, and they say, well, we only have 2 hours. Well, the only thing you're going to get out of that 2 hours is awareness,
Right. That's all I can give you.
right?
Right.
That's going to be your outcome. You're not going to get the outcomes that you really want.
That's
So
right.
it's even how it applies in that perspective as well.
Yep. So
Yeah.
whenever we're talking about the duration or length of a particular engagement, it has to be dictated by the outcome the client is really looking for. If they're saying they want their people to actually leave your program with some new solid skills, they're not going to get that in 2 hours. I don't even think you could do it in 2 hours with focused on only one skill. Maybe if it's just conversational skills, yeah. But if it's an actual physical skill, I think it's going to take you longer than 2 hours to get that uh, mapped out or rehearsed or explained, practiced or demonstrated, practiced. There's stuff to be done. So you have to really much focus on what's your real outcome. What do you want people to walk away with when this is done? Because 2 hours awareness, maybe I can boost your knowledge a little bit. But that's a big ask. Yeah. Okay. Anyway,
Well,
that's
at the conference in Baltimore last week, I spoke on this very conversation.
oh, do tell.
Yeah, and in fact, it was a diversity themed conference, and I have a link for the change grid that I offered the audience in the end, and I did get a couple of bites on that. But I do
Excellent.
have some folks, yeah, but I do have a couple of warm leads, I'll call them, of folks that are interested in having a discussion with me about how to move their organizations out grid.
Excellent. Excellent.
Yeah.
Well,
Awesome.
we'll get into more about the strategy for, or what's the follow-up strategy after the trade show. We'll get into that on next call as well, because you're absolutely right. You gave some bait, some took the bait, and that's really great. So now what? So that's what we want to really be exploring. How do you do the tension management?
And that's why that relaxed perspective becomes important because again, we have to, always keep in mind your positioning, your start of an engagement
Mhm.
matters just as much as the engagement
Yeah,
itself.
right. The
So I
success in life is best begun in the center of the change grid.
right,
But sooner or later, I got to get out there between the green and the red. That's where life is
right.
lived.
That's the
Otherwise-
implementation science of things.
exactly.
Yeah,
Otherwise, the inside of that green circle, by and large, is the domain of the mind.
right. Are you familiar with that implementation intentions?
Yep, I am. I am indeed.
Yeah, yeah.
Yeah.
And they
Um,
use an expression of creative tension within that because it's based on this ideal, if this, then that, and you give yourself a series of scenarios to experiment with, and then you're operating underneath the radar of, amygdala hijacking where you'll
Yep.
go up in stress.
Right, and we would go into that and say they also need to understand that creativity lives in one place on the change grid. True artistic creativity is a downgrid, more relaxed kind of a situation where creative problem solving is upgrid. So am I trying to solve something, in which case I need upgrade intention, upgrade engagement, because the problem has presented itself and is imposing itself, as opposed to from a place of relaxation. In fact, I'll say this, Tim, unmute for a second. When you're producing your best pieces of jewelry, where are you on the change grid?
Mm.
Oh, that's a great question.
I mean, I'm going to believe you're not up in stress.
No, not at
You're
all.
under no deadline. You're not in power stress.
I would say it's fluid, because I can be up midnight, 1 in the morning, crafting.
Yeah.
And so, yeah,
You get lost in it. You're kind of on autopilot. You're really, if anything else, trying to create a feeling in the form of jewelry.
yes,
And
yes.
so that's what's happening down grid. This is where creativity really expresses itself. Now, if we want to talk about true artistic creativity, I would say that in the world of creators, there are driven analyticals. Keep in mind, to be a good creator, you have to be primarily an analytical. And the reason for that is because every one of these art forms has a science underneath it. There are rules that if you understand, you'll know what you can expect out of the medium that you've chosen and how to best use it. So Tim had to learn a whole bunch of techniques before he started to assemble a piece of jewelry, because if he didn't learn the techniques first, I promise you his first pieces of jewelry were not as well finished or were not as sturdy as they could have been. Am I right, Tim?
Yes, and I'd be way up grid.
Way upgrade because wait, it broke, whatever, it's flying everywhere. So keep in mind that behind all art is science. And the people who know those media, they know what they can do with it, how to manipulate it, how to combine them, etc. They're going to get a great deal done. Now you got to ask yourself, are they an expressive analytical, which is creating art purely for the sake of expression? Who cares if anyone ever buys it? Whatever, I just created it. Where a driven analytical artist is somebody who's saying like, oh no, I'm doing this because there's a market for it. There's an opportunity to make some money and spread my art and all that sort of stuff. That's a very different mindset, where the people that are amiable are artists are kind of doing things for their friends and family. You know, they tend to do more things to give things away. Like in all of our houses, I'm sure that we've got some comforter that our great aunt crocheted. You know, it's an art form, but they never intended to make money off of it, but they did it to kind of spread that kind of thought and feeling. And then you've got the analytical analyticals who can tell you anything and everything there is to know about jewelry making, but haven't done a piece for years and years. But they can criticize everybody else's work, or they could judge a competition, but they don't have enough productive tension to actually make the art.
That's interesting hearing you say that, T, because in the beginning, it was not intended to be a business. I actually was doing it for myself.
Yeah, there you are. So that's more of the
I
expressive.
bought one off my wrist in a meeting, and folks started saying, hey, you should do this, you should start a business. And it evolved into that, but that was not the original intent.
No, but there it is.
So what is that? That's the analytical?
If you're talking about a true artist, they are primarily an analytical.
But like what Tim just described, because like when I read biographies of like the Michelangelos and those kinds of people, they like visited back in the day, they visited other art studios and seen what other people were doing, and
Yeah,
then kind of collectively got ideas. But it was like this accidental discovery almost.
yeah,
So
but like,
what do you call that?
well, I think that what it is was it's still downgrade. We're still more of an expressive analytical,
Expressive. Okay.
because you're having some fun with it. I promise you. And Tim,
Right.
correct me if I'm wrong, but I promise you, Tim had to be bitten by the jewelry bug before he decided to start making jewelry. It had
Yeah.
already captured his eyes, right, Tim? I mean, you didn't just one day go, "Oh, look, beads, let me string them." You know, not how it worked. He probably got
Right.
umpteen shows or shops or whatever and seen stuff. And he just thought, well, you know what? They're just not making something I want to put on my wrist. And
Yeah.
so let
Yeah.
me see what I can find and I'll do it myself.
Hey T, I'd like to add something based on what Brian talked about, how like Michelangelo and some of the older greats like to visit others. Like I study comedians, and a lot of comedians don't like to visit the shows of others because they don't want to taint their art.
Right. Well, and I don't mind sharing with you guys that the one I can tell you two things, and they are going to be at least 95 to 99% true. I don't read other people's books and I don't go to other people's lectures. From the very
Mm.
beginning, I've wanted to know that everything that I'm sharing is, for the most part, by and large, out of the mind of me. Now, because I'm all about the merging of brilliance, if someone brought me a model, and you've heard me do this countless times, you can bring me the model and I'll look at it, but I'm not going to read their book. Right?
Mm.
I'm not interested in going through their training program. I'm not interested in getting into the nitty gritties about it. You show me a diagram and I'm going to go, oh, well, we'll figure out what this diagram means. Maybe we're right, maybe we're wrong. Maybe we can find a cheat sheet somewhere, but I'm not going to go do a deep dive in it because I'm not really interested in duplicating what they've already done. I'm interested in seeing if it integrates, and I don't need to have the whole story to determine whether it integrates or not.
So that's the analytical.
Uh-huh. Yeah, but it's
Yeah.
a different kind of a thing. I'm analyzing it for a very different reason. Where other people might say, no, I need to be an apprentice. So maybe I need a mentor. Now you're going to get a lot more of that person's influence in the work that you do. So let's say that Tim, and do feel free to chime in here. Tim could have aligned himself with one of the top jewelry makers and said, I'd like to serve as your apprentice. I'd like to learn, but I promise you, Tim would have learned how to make that artist's jewelry instead of learning how to make his own.
Make his own. Yeah.
It's
So
one
Yeah,
thing to be it's one thing to be inspired by other people's work, but you don't ever want to, lose you. The whole point is for you to be unique. So
right.
Tim, what are your thoughts on that?
well, yeah, and my art is my first love. I actually went off to college to become a commercial
Well,
artist.
there you are then.
Oh,
There
awesome.
you are then.
Awesome.
And I took a vocational assessment many years ago, and the results came out as art, entrepreneurial, and social. And then I took it about 20 years after that, and I have the same result.
Yep. And so
Interesting.
he just described himself as being an amiable, driven, analytical.
Mm.
So he wants the people element in it. He wants to have the business aspect of it, but for the most part, what he's doing is an act of creativity. And so it's about art, but art for art's sake is not a way to pay the bills.
Well, I will tell you, when I go to my supplier, I spend more time. There's nothing for me to be in that place for 2 hours looking at,
Right. Yeah.
visualizing, what would that stone look like as a bracelet and how would I finish it off? I mean, it takes
That's
me
right.
more time doing that than sometimes it does to make the bracelet.
Right. Now here's
Wow.
the difference. If Tim were an expressive analytical artist, he would have gone into that supplier and basically went, "Oh, pretty stones, I'm buying them."
Right.
Where he goes in and says, no, could I turn this into a particular bracelet? So that whole entrepreneurial part is already coming into play. He knows that there are expenses involved with making the bracelets. He wants to have a profit margin. And so he's not going to just buy them because they're pretty. He's going to buy them because they're worthwhile to include in one of his designs. Am I right, Tim? Or are you just like a bead hound?
Spot on. I'm here smiling because you're spot on.
Yeah, yeah. Otherwise,
Wow.
you just end up with drawers full of beads, and you forget what you have. So buying with intention, buying with purpose.
So that's a master craftsman,
Well,
right?
yeah,
Because they're
remember that,
interested in the long termism of but they can play the short term game, but there's a long term perspective
and
of
that's it. It's like
mastering your
think of him as
craft.
Michelangelo looking at the block of
Yeah,
marble that became David. He said
right,
David was already inside of it. I just chipped away what wasn't David.
right,
And
right.
so for Tim, it's kind of like he's looking at these stones and going like, what is the potential for this stone? And if it resonates with him, and again, Tim, I feel like I'm putting words in your mouth, but I understand the mindset of how a creative person that's running a business operates.
Well,
And
no, you're right. And I want to thank you, Brian, for that because I've been searching for a title for my business cards and my website. So I'll now use Master Craftsman.
there you go.
Yeah, and
Absolutely.
The Japanese, they call it shakunin, and
Mhm.
shakunin is about this long-termism kind of
Yeah.
perspective of
Yeah.
mastering whatever craft, whether it's at work, business, and they really, teach that to kids very young.
Yep.
Hmm.
And so
Yep.
that's
Yep.
How
where
do
I
you
learned
spell that,
it.
Brian? Brian, how do you spell that?
Shakunin,
Shikun.
Shokunin, I believe is the correct spelling.
Thank you.
Yeah.
One more time on that, Brian. SHOK.
SHOKUNIN, Shakunin.
Okay, thank you.
Yeah, that's the master craftsman. About being apprenticeship in life. So, you know, that discipline that T just described that comes from the change field, understanding where creativity is. There's a certain discipline that you go through, and you know, he just described you in that discipline. That's what made me think about that word. You know,
Right.
discipline is teacher or learner, right?
Mhm.
So there's a
Yep,
certain learning that goes along with that, and that's a regenerative thing. Is long term.
Yep. Now, keep in mind, Tim could take his business further upgrid and outgrid. So he could take it from being a driven analytical to more of an analytical driver. So that would mean that the art form has already been established. He already has certain models that he duplicates, but he no longer has to assemble them himself. He might have people doing it for him, and now he's more overseeing something being done. That's what Chihuly did when he lost his eyesight. You know, a lot of the artists that you see everywhere, the ones that have been over marketed, that kind of thing, or you get it being a driven driver, and then all you're concerned about is peddle my stuff as much as possible. Who's the one that was the painter of light? Thomas Kincaid.
Yes.
Okay, he had his heyday, sold his stuff for a lot of money. Now he's kind of like passe,
Mm.
you know? So it's like, no, who's the guy that paints the dolphins? Or all those seascapes, whatever. You know, he had his heyday, and now his stuff has been so overly marketed that not only is the market saturated with it, it's become cliche. So Tim doesn't want that. He creates, you know, unique works of art.
Yeah.
Oh,
But
absolutely.
he's,
And I go out grid whenever I do a show.
yep, you got to, because you want to, you know, you packed it up once and lugged it once. You
Right.
don't want to lug it home. You just don't. All right. Anyway, okay, we've gone way over time, but great conversation. So we'll pick up on the trade show selling stuff when we talk next. So with that, thanks, gentlemen. Have yourself a wonderful weekend. Bye for now.
Thank you.
Thank you. Bye.
Right.